It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Welcome to RealAg Radio here on June 25th, 2024. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. As always, on Tuesdays, it is Tuesdays with Lyndsey. I'm super excited about today's show. We've got some fascinating conversations. We've got some good agronomy advice and very special. Kelvin Heppner is going to join me at the end of the show for a special news segment because, a couple key things are going on, and frankly, some of it we can talk about very openly, and some of it we cannot, but there is a lot happening with Cereals Canada that we need to delve into, and I know most of you were probably up late watching the Oilers sadly fall to the Florida Panthers. However, there was also a by-election happening in Toronto that you may have heard us talk about on the issues panel on Friday, and that election went down to the wire. This is a Liberal stronghold downtown Toronto that by all accounts it was going to be a tight race, but really, it was one that for the past 30 years has been held by the Liberals. And why would that change? Well, if you stayed up to watch the game and then hung around on social media to see the outcome, you will know that actually, yes, the Conservative candidate won. So Kelvin's going to join me at the end of the show to talk about that and implications of that as well. But we've also got, as I mentioned, we've got a Canola School on top dressing canola, the why and the when and the how. We've also got a clip from last night's episode of The Agronomists. Please, anytime I have entomologists on the show, it is the most fun. And we were up against the playoffs last night, and so not many people joined us live, but plenty will watch it after, and I highly recommend you do that. Head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomists. Go check it out. It's a fabulous episode, so I just pulled a fun clip. I always have fun with the entomologists, let me tell you. So that's Tyler Wist and James Tansey joining me for that one. And then I've also got my conversation with Ian McCreary and Marcus Reidner. They have been involved in the Farmer and Rancher Forum that was hosted by the Farmers for Climate Solutions. There's a report that's come out of these meetings. It was a bit of a different way to put meetings together and to inform policy and make policy recommendations. So I'll be asking them about that process in, I believe, the third segment. So stick around for that. All right. If you've got any feedback on today's show, 855-776-6147, or of course, drop us a DM across social media, or you can zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. Let's get to it. I'll be back right after this with a clip from The Agronomists all about grasshoppers, chewers, and other pests.
Choose Viatude fungicide and unleash best-in-class sclerotinia protection in canola and premium protection against white mold in soybeans. Viatude contains a powerful premix of Onmira Active and Prothioconazole. This unique combo delivers high-performance disease control, crop safety, mix compatibility, resistance management, and advanced mobility for excellent coverage and superior plant protection. Choose Viatude fungicide for stronger, more vigorous crops.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch WheatPete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and we have now, as promised, just a quick clip on grasshoppers. Specifically, we're talking about Saskatchewan, but conditions really do apply in Manitoba and Alberta as far as what Jim Tansey and Tyler Wist discuss here in this clip. So grasshopper populations really do build in dry years, and of course, for many areas of the prairies, for huge regions, that has been the case for the past several years. So grasshopper egg laying last fall was astronomical. There were several models that showed that there would be a lot of grasshopper population to potentially emerge this year. But as we're finding, and that's this clip that I pulled from last night's episode of The Agronomists, conditions have not been great for emergence, and that could be great news for farmers battling this very destructive pest. This modeling, of course, that gives us a degree of, where to be on the lookout, where conditions were conducive to such things. But what then? So here we are, almost end of June. We went through a whole winter. We have to go through spring. So let's say this was accurate going in. It's a good model. What sort of makes this map start to match up with actual infestations? What conditions work best for grasshoppers?
It's all about degree day accumulation. So there was some work that was done in the late 80s, and it determined that for migratory grasshopper, and that's the model that this is made on, needs 100 degree days base 10. So 100, 10 degrees Celsius is a bit of a magic temperature for grasshopper development. So 100 growing degree days base 10 for hatch to begin. And so we've just crossed that in the southern part of the province. We had a big band from Saskatoon stretching down to Regina. For some time, we've crossed it now, but we just couldn't break 90 with it being so cool. So we've crossed that threshold for grasshopper development, and we're starting to see the emergence. So they don't all emerge at the same time. So we're going to get this peak in emergence associated with those populations, and then they'll trail off, and that emergence can continue for weeks. Functionally, we're just seeing the beginning of populations, and of course, the longer they spend in the soil, the more bad things can happen to nice little grasshoppers, right? So, predators can happen. I haven't seen any evidence that moist conditions can be detrimental to grasshopper eggs, like very dry conditions can be. But once they do hatch and they experience those moist conditions, of course, they get exposed to, fungal pathogens and other issues that can limit their population. So we're hoping with, a continued moist trend and diminishing populations of grasshoppers as they get sick.
So Tyler, that and last week, and we've got a wheat school up at wheatschool.com right now about looking at grasshopper thresholds and populations, and so Tyler, to that point, with a return, thankfully, of some decent moisture in many areas, is that going to be enough? I guess to say, grasshoppers won't be an issue, or have these years of dry weather really set us up for it could still be a very significant issue for this year?
I'll get out my crystal ball here and let's see.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
Now, in my sweep samples, we've been getting nymphal grasshoppers, and so they're there. And you get enough puddles and they'll drown. But like Jim said too, the fungal pathogen can get going in their populations and knock them down. This is the spring we've been hoping for grasshoppers. So I think if we had a hot, dry spring, we'd be talking about a lot more damage already.
Oh yeah.
So I think we might be getting saved by this cooler, wetter spring right now. So the grasshoppers don't like it hot and dry. Has it stopped them? Jim, you've been out there.
Yeah.
Taking some sweeps.
I think I know it's almost July, but it's still a little early, just because of degree day accumulation, because it's been so cool. But again, the longer that they take to get through their life cycle, the more bad things can happen to them. So
All right, so that again, Jim Tansey with Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture, Tyler Wist with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada based at Saskatoon. The two of them joined me on last night's episode of The Agronomists. If you would like to check out the entire program, head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomists. You can watch that show and all the ones before. They're all up there. You can also, and this is a lot of fun, and I probably say this every week, but I really would love to see you there, Mondays, 8 p.m. Eastern. So right now, that's 6 p.m. in Saskatchewan. Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern, it goes live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, or realagriculture.com/live. You can find it there as well. And it really is so much fun to be part of the live audience. You get to ask your questions of the experts. And here's a little plug for what's coming up. So next week is the holiday, so there will not be a show. But July 8th, I am going to focus on spraying in challenging conditions. So that's either very hot, perhaps quite cool and wet, or very windy conditions. And can we have a sprayer discussion without Mr. Tom Wolfe? Absolutely not. So Tom Wolfe will be there July 8th. So check that out. All right, let's take a quick break and I'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today. Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola. It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147 Sirius XM. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith, and it is June 25th. My kids are just about done school, and I can taste summer vacation and not making any more school lunches. Okay, let's switch gears now. So if you weren't aware, this past winter there was something called the Farmer and Rancher Forum that was put on by Farmers for Climate Solutions. And it was a bit of a different way of putting together focus groups, farmers and ranchers from across the prairies to get together to put together a policy document, some recommendations on where Canada should go as far as climate solutions, climate smart agriculture, trying to reduce our emissions within agriculture. And so this has wrapped up. There is now the report with the recommendations available. And so I reached out to those who were involved in the Farmer and Rancher Forum for some feedback on what happened, what it was like, and where the recommendations have landed. Joining me now to talk about the Farmer and Rancher Forum, I have Ian McCreary and Marcus Reidner. Now, Ian, you're from Bladworth, Saskatchewan, and we're co-lead on this Farmer and Rancher Forum. Welcome here. Tell me a bit about where you farm and how you got involved in this project.
All right, Lyndsey, we farm Bladworth, Saskatchewan, which is on the main highway between Saskatoon and Regina. We're a mixed farm, so we've got cattle as well as all the standard grain, grain and oil seeds and pulse crops that are on a typical Saskatchewan farm. And
how then did you get involved in the Farmer and Rancher Forum?
All right, well, I've done some work with a group called Farmers for Climate Solutions. I chaired a couple national task forces for them in previous years where we were working on policy pieces And and it was clear to us that we needed more input from the farm community. My wife's the facilitator by training, and was insisting, listen, you guys, if you're going to keep doing policy, you better figure out a way to get farmers at the table to get more involved. And so working with Farmers for Climate Solutions, we developed the concept of the Farmer Forum, which brought prairie farmers and ranchers together to discuss environmental issues and how we could improve our environmental outcomes.
So now, Marcus, you're based near Didsbury, Alberta. Tell us a bit about your farm and your involvement with this forum.
Yeah, you bet. So we run a mixed livestock farm. We mostly run animals on pasture, and then we have some other people who are doing market gardening and some greenhouse work on our farm. They have their own businesses, and then we just provide them a little bit of land and infrastructure. My original background and my wife's background are in the tech sector, and we only started farming about 12 years ago when I started some urban farming, and we've since moved out to our main quarter section right now, just about an hour north of Calgary in Didsbury. So that's kind of a little bit of the background on our farm. And I got involved in the forum because someone sent me a random email, and I saw the email and I was like, hey, this seems like a really interesting thing. I'm into policy, and I'm into having farmers and grassroots voices helping to dictate policy. So this might be a really good fit for me. And so we had applied. It was kind of a random draw. We sent in our application, and then we were lucky enough to be chosen. So we were really, really happy to participate in the program.
Right. And so that is perhaps, Ian, if you could maybe shed some light on that. I mean, this certainly I saw the emails when they went out, we've been sort of following along what was happening with these events. But it was, Ian, maybe a bit of a different process for putting these groups together. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Lyndsey, the Farmer and Rancher Forum follows a process developed by a group called Mass LBP. And the process is called the Civic Lottery, and people are invited by letter to participate. And in the case of this particular forum, there were 10,000 letters went out to a random cross-section of farmers and ranchers from across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And then, based on their responses, a cross-section of people were selected, basically using an algorithm to make sure that there was as close a representation of what ended up being the membership to what is prairie agriculture. So we had ranchers, we had farmers, we had men, we had women, we had various age groups, we had various production types, and the intent was to hear voices. The idea is that if you just have a public meeting, you tend to get the loud voices, but if you invite people at random, it increases the chances of getting the thoughtful voices. And I think we were very successful in getting a lot of thoughtful voices to this process.
Mm-hmm. So, Marcus, from your perspective, what was it like to attend the meeting? Do you think that it hit the mark on thoughtful conversation on these topics?
Yeah, it was. This is one of the most fascinating groups of people I've had the pleasure of working with. We had lots of varying opinions, lots of strong opinions, lots of different types of operations, and really interesting cross-section of what it's like in rural setting on the prairies and in farming. And it was a real pleasure to work with everybody there. And I think because there was such a good diversity of opinions and voices around the various issues that we were dealing with, we were able to come up with some really strong recommendations that have a good chance of traction, not just with policymakers, but also with people actually on the ground doing the work. And the ability for this group to come together and set aside very diametrically opposed opinions and work on something that's going to work for everyone, I think that was a real pleasure and probably one of the highlights of being part of this forum.
I was just going to add to that. One of the unique things about this, and Marcus alluded to it by saying it had to work for everybody, is that we did not vote on the recommendations. We worked by consensus. So there would have been large numbers of people that would have liked us to have stronger recommendations in that room. But we worked in order to try and find recommendations that we could get a full consensus on. So all 36 participants, or there was one who was unable to make it, but all of the participants who attended the last session said, yes, no, this recommendation works for me. And we had a process called the gradients of agreement to make sure you agreed at a specific level, and everybody in that room. It wasn't like this was a majority or anything else. This was a full consensus view of that, and that was a different approach too.
So and so that sort of does related to my question, Ian, on what were some of the contentious issues, because I would imagine in exactly that, trying to reach consensus, you really do have to hash out perhaps opposing or very different views on some of the how or the why. What were some of the difficult or more challenging issues to kind of put together in consensus?
Well, I think after the first session, everybody was saying it'll be amazing if anybody agrees on anything without somebody having to die, because it was there were lots of contentious stuff at the first round, and at the center of that, at the heart of that, is that there is a wider division of opinion on the Canadian prairies about the importance of climate change as a result of greenhouse gases than exists in most other communities. And as a result of having a random cross-section of people from the prairies, we had strong, diverse opinions on that. And because that's front of mind for many, that certainly came out very strongly. And so in order to keep people pulling traces and working together, we had to reach an agreement that we wouldn't attempt to argue with each other on the science of climate change. We would move forward on those areas where we thought we could make a difference without having everybody in the room agree on that, because some had said, I won't agree on that. So that was a difficult piece. What the trade-off ended up being that we did agree we had to measure our greenhouse gas emissions as part of reporting to the wider community, because it's recognized that the people who buy our products are less divided on the science of climate change than the people of the prairies.
Now, we do have a report. It is available online. There is a report that has come out of this. Marcus, in that report, in looking through it, what do you think for you are some of the highlights for having been part of this process and seeing it through to the final report? What do you think are some of the real wins from this forum?
Oh, well, the recommendations really run a gamut between things that are really quick to implement, that policy could get moving really, really fast, to proposals that are like a good 20-25 year work in progress. So there's a real span of actions that can be taken that cover a whole distance of times and topics. I think the areas that I was most directly interested in were recommendations around measurement and recommendations around soil. Our farm is, because I come from the tech sector, our farm is really heavily data oriented already. We do a lot of data tracking on various metrics: soil health, carbon in the soil, animal health, finances, all those fun things. And so there were some recommendations in the measurements section that would be policies to help our farm produce better data and get that data into the hands of people doing modeling and research, and then get their data back to us, so that there's a nice, timely flow of data moving from on the ground in the farm up into research and academics and into policy, and then back down again. And those sorts of policies really, really really appealed to me, because that's just sort of the nature of how we're farming. And then anything to do with soil health, like improving, the health of microbiology and testing to see how healthy your soil is. Those are kind of the foundations of where we track our productivity on our farm. So I was really, really pleased to have a lot of solid policies coming out around those. So that's kind of where I was sitting.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ian, what happens now? So this is, this report is out. As Marcus has alluded to, there's some sort of short-term or very immediate action items that we could see picked up and run with. There's some long-term vision. Specifically for this forum, is this something that will be revisited every few years, or what's the plan for it?
So this forum was sponsored by a group called Farmers for Climate Solutions, and that's a national coalition of farmers and farm organizations that received the report. And they have, they recognize that the action in order to get it completed on this ends up being various audiences for various recommendations. And so Farmers for Climate Solutions, where the necessary audience is government, they'll be talking to government and making sure government's aware of those. In other cases, there's a recommendations to farm groups, and the other ones, some of them are public recommendations. And so Farmers for Climate Solutions will take this as part of their core learning about things there are consensus about on the prairies, and in their discussions with the various organizations that they try to make a difference with, they'll advance these recommendations. Mm-hmm. In terms of the next steps, it's our hope that action items flow from these by the players that can make those changes. So I'll pick a specific one. We recommend that urban centers beyond a certain level be asked to process their sewage in a way that removes the nutrients that can go back to agriculture, completing the nutrient cycle. So in that case, the actors end up being, in many cases, the urban centers themselves, perhaps with provincial and federal support. So there's various players that need to receive the recommendation, and Farmers for Climate Solutions will work to make sure that the people who can make the change receive the notice that there was a consensus that this is a step that can make a difference. Mm-hmm. For some of them, it's the farm community, and in those cases, it'll be a process of making that public.
All right. Okay. So more to come on this. Ian, Marcus, thank you both so much for joining me here on RealAg Radio. This has been a fantastic discussion. I thank you both for making time for me today. With that, we're going to take a quick break here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM, and I'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
If you only listen to RealAg Radio, you only get half the picture. For greater insight into the issues that affect farming, tune in to RealAgriculture.com. Crops, livestock, machinery, farm management, and the markets, even food and travel. Real Agriculture Online digs deeper into the topics that affect the way you work and live. So get connected today. Read, watch, and listen to the people who know at RealAgriculture.com.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Sean Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on Sirius XM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. And you may have noticed, if you get our daily e-newsletter or if you subscribe on our YouTube channel, that it is Absolutely, it is school season. So we have several different agronomy schools. The big five are corn, soybeans, wheat, canola, and pulses. And right now, our field editors, so Bern Tobin, Amber Bell, who you'll hear today, Kelvin Heppner, they're all out on the landscape collecting key agronomy information and getting those visuals and getting in the field and getting to the ground level and getting that information that you need. One of the canola schools that we just had go up late last week, again, you can find it on YouTube, is a question of should I or when should I top dress canola? Definitely not a super common practice, but one that potentially could be much more common this year with perhaps the return of some yield potential. So we're going to go now to the Canola School. This is Amber Bell, our field editor out of Alberta, and Mike Palmier from Max Ag Consulting out of Saskatchewan with the Canola School.
I am here today with Mike Palmier, and we are going to talk about top dressing on canola for this Canola School. So welcome, Mike. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Amber.
So we're going to be talking about top dressing, which isn't a very common thing, but we're in Saskatchewan right now, and we've had some interesting years.
Yeah, I mean, we're at a point where we've received more rainfall than we did all of last year, and in some cases almost double what we've received all last year. So the crop potential is looking good, and so it's to go out there and assess what your potential is, make sure that your weeds are taken care of, and understand what your subsoil moisture is, and make a decision.
Okay, and what would be the environmental conditions that have led up to even the possibility of top dressing for this year?
Well, I talked a little bit about that on just before about understanding what your subsoil moisture is. So going into this spring, we're actually quite dry. We've had 3 dry years in a row. We had less snowfall over the winter than what we've had, a little bit more runoff because more frozen soils, and so we weren't really thinking about a top dress application. That was more pie in the sky as the idea there. But with the amount of moisture and precipitation that we've received since, now we realize, and we do a lot of work with soil moisture probes in the soil to understand how much moisture is there and what that means for the potential of the crop. And we realize that a lot of our area in west central Saskatchewan, we have a full soil moisture profile down to a meter, if not very close to being full. And so we do have the potential to have really excellent crops. So it's to get an idea on what is going to come down the pipe for the weather, which we never really know for sure. Right now, the one thing that's a huge benefit for us is we've had very mild temperatures, and the long-term forecasts are saying slightly below average temperatures, and so that is a huge win because we've been so warm the last few years, and that's really limited our rooting of our crops. So that, and assuming that we have average moisture here on out, there's definitely an opportunity to gain more yield than what we had targeted in our fertility planning through the wintertime.
Okay, so I know we're talking about top dressing, but in general, how would you recommend managing fertility coming out of a drought and into a year where there is more moisture?
The first step is a soil test. I mean, it's very, very important to be able to understand what you have for residual nutrients, especially nitrates in the soil. So the soil test is the number one key. We do a lot of 2-depth soil sampling because through the winter months and the snowfall and moving that moisture through the profile, a lot of those nitrates have moved deeper into the soil. So if you're doing a 0 to 6 or a 0 to 8 sample, you're missing a lot of them. As well, we've had 3 consecutive years of drought and poor growing conditions. So again, a lot of those unused nitrates are really starting to move lower in the profile. So to really understand what your full nutrient profile is, because your roots on an actively growing and healthy crop are going to reach that and pull. And I think part of what we do as agronomists is psychological with our customers. Because I feel like after the last 3 years, there's a lot of talk about, okay, I need to be able to manage my nutrition a little bit better, scale back on my yield targets in my fertility planning, apply less nutrients, more top dress potentially, but we have to be careful with that because we have a very narrow window to top dress and make a decision. And so our strategy is to make sure that we have a very healthy yield target to start off with, and that we top dress more for like exceptional conditions where we have really good conditions and we want to chase them. Because I've seen lots of instances where guys are relying too much on the top dress. It doesn't get done at the proper time or done at all. And you need moisture to be able to move it down to the root zone, and there's a lot of potential revenue lost with that.
Right. And what would be that proper time for top dressing in canola?
Well, mainly the proper timing is any time really by emergence to pre-cabbaging. The issue with cabbaging isn't anything, it's not that the plant can't uptake the nitrogen from the soil at that stage. It's more of a leaf burn situation, right? Because we want to use specific nozzles for top dress, like a streamer. Most of them are 3 or 5 stream nozzles. There's also like a Needham top dress bar, chafer bar they call that. Those are all important. And so the reason why to use those special nozzles and those streamer nozzles is because we want to have a stream of product, and if it hits a plant, it crosses that plant quickly, because what it hits as far as plant biomass, it will injure. And so that's really important to do that. And as well, when you're looking at that top dressing application, then is to be able to make sure that your boom height is at as consistent as possible, and you're not getting those streams crossing by having your booms too high either. So there's some number of things with that.
Right.
But the plant will utilize that nitrogen all the way through its growing cycle.
Oh, great. So you've gone out and you've put top dressing on your crop. What is the potential difference you could see using that method?
Well, if we know that we don't have the fertility there to support what the potential crop is, I mean, the potential is immense, right?
Right.
So again, it's to understand what you have in the soil for moisture, make sure you have things taken care of. Obviously, we cannot, we can only do so much as far as rectifying any issues that we have with, phosphorus and potassium and those types of immobile nutrients. Make sure that you have a good base with all of those, and hopefully you've already done that, because it's, starting to get a little bit late. And really, it's to make sure that you understand what your plant needs for nitrogen. A lot of the uptake and removal charts would say about 3.3 pounds of nitrogen is needed to produce a bushel. Some of the numbers that we've used are a little bit different than that. But to be able to correlate that to understand. And so, maybe if you're putting down 10 US gallons of UAN on the crop through your sprayer, it could equate to 10 bushels of canola. Wow. If the conditions are there and everything else is taken care of, that's what your potential is.
Right. So you talked earlier about soil sampling. Would that soil sample be taken before you've seeded, or is that something that you'd want to do at this stage?
Well, yeah, definitely you want to do it before you seed. And ideally, we do a lot of soil sampling in the fall so that we can do proper planting through the winter time. Right. In the spring, it's just a challenge to be able to react to what you're finding. So you could do a soil sample right before a top dress, be able to react off of that. It's just a timing and logistics issue to be able to make sure that you can turn that around. There's also avenues as far as tissue testing to understand the amount of nitrogen that's in that soil, that's in that tissue. Again, then you would want to look at maybe doing a new tissue and whole plant, and just that turnaround time and logistics could be a challenge.
Right, because it does take time to get those results back from the lab.
Exactly.
And then make those decisions. So.
Yeah, and there are more real-time digital tissue testers that are out there that I think the industry is looking at. We're still, there's still a lot of work to be done to just understand, the response to that.
So is there a timeline where top dressing will stop giving a boost to the yield, or just stopping economical with how much time and money is going to be going into it?
Right. So again, at the cabbaging stage, it'll still uptake and you would still get a response. It's just more plant injury that I'm concerned with. And that would be the same as you go into flowering, right? We want to be really careful not to burn any flowers off or hurt those reproductive stages. Now, there's been some work done in Europe for sure, where they've top dressed even late flowering canola, like really late, and they've seen an increase in yield. But I haven't really seen that work done in Western Canada. And so how short our life cycle is on our plants, and our potentials are different and all that stuff. I'm not sure exactly what to make of that yet, but they have seen increases in yield with top dressing late flowering, even just slightly post flower.
Oh, wow.
After that, I would say that your chances of response are getting pretty slim.
Okay, cool. Well, that's a lot of information. Is there anything else that you want to add? Anything else you want to throw out to our growers?
It's a system. Like when we're talking about top dressing nitrogen, I just wanted to reiterate that to have a balanced nutrition package is important. Make sure your weeds are taken care of, that you have the proper plant establishment in order to reach your full potential. All of those things are important, not just nitrogen in your top dress.
I know, and we tend to focus on the nitrogen piece too often, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, from this Canola School, we are going to hop to a very special news segment, everybody. Kelvin Heppner has agreed to join me here in the last segment to cover some very important news items that have come up over the last day. So we're going to take a quick break, and I'll be back with that and Kelvin Heppner right after this.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Tuesday, June 25th. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and joining me now for a very special segment of the news is Kelvin Heppner with Real Agriculture, based at Altona, Manitoba. How are you, Kelvin?
Doing well here, Lyndsey. The sun is shining, and it's fungicide season around here, so the plains are buzzing today.
Protect that crop. It was humid yesterday, so that's going to do it for you. It is also humid here. I would say, Kelvin, before we hop into some very important news, you have a knack for finding very interesting stats on X, Twitter, whatever we call it. And so everyone, you should know this too. Kelvin sends me a tweet about that Ottawa had, 56 hours continuous of a dew point higher than 21 degrees Celsius in this last
and it was
atmosphere.
I think it was
river.
the second longest on record.
Mm-hmm.
The second longest on record for Ottawa. It was quite the hot and humid weather, like you talked about on the show.
Ridiculous. Anyway, okay, so let's dive in. We have a few things to cover. We'll start with Cereals Canada and GATE. We, of course, late last week, we did discuss this on the issues panel. Our Saturday email for our Western audience was focused on Cereals Canada, on this building, this direction. We have a poll. I can share some of the results of that poll. But we also then got some news after that all went out that the announcement even for this is on hold. So what do we know so far as GATE is concerned?
There's a lot going on right now with Cereals Canada, which is supposed to be our stakeholder value chain for the grain industry here in Canada. It was launched with the end of the Canadian Wheat Board, and then a few years ago it merged together with the Canadian International Grains Institute. And we talked about this last week, like you said, Lyndsey, the construction of a new facility in Winnipeg to bring together all of Canada's grain industry institutions in one location and serve as a hub for research and development and technical support. The launch announcement for that proposal for this Global Agriculture Technology Exchange, or GATE, was supposed to happen on Thursday in conjunction with the Cereals Canada annual general meeting. And now we have been told, and stakeholders were informed late last week, that it is on hold. It will not be held on Thursday, and no new date has been given. But this is just one part of what's a lot of different moving parts within Cereals Canada and the organization right now.
So so here's a little behind the scenes, right? There are many conversations that we as journalists have, that we have on background, that we have off the record, but we also get a lot of unsolicited information that people may send in and say, hey, did you know this is happening? And so we've also received several messages on other things happening at Cereals Canada. What do we know? What can we share?
Well, this is where we are still sifting through what is information that is off the record versus on background versus on the record, and talking to many different sources. So right now, we probably can't say everything that we're fairly confident of, but we can't say everything right now because we haven't verified it with enough sources or directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Cereals Canada itself says it cannot discuss membership renewals, but we are told from multiple sources that there is some upheaval in Cereals Canada's membership right now. Quite a few sources telling us that there are several company members that have given notice or are in the process of giving notice to Cereals Canada that they are not renewing their membership in the organization. And this includes several grain companies. One of those companies, which we can say is confirmed, is Cargill. And if you go on the Cereals Canada website, other grain companies that are listed as members are G3, Northwest Terminal, Parrish and Heimbecker, Richardson, and Viterra. And so right now we're working on confirming this information that we've received from multiple people. But yeah, there's some upheaval in the Cereals Canada membership, and this building, this construction of this massive or high expensive facility, as was proposed at least, or was going to be proposed in Winnipeg, is just one part of this. There's a broader discussion happening about the value of money that grain companies, farm groups, of course, are also all at the table, crop input companies as well. The value that they put into this organization, and it seems that the grain companies especially, not sure if it's due to tighter margins in the grain trade right now or other factors, but it feels there's a theme here in terms of grain companies feeling they're not receiving the value on investment. And so there's a broader discussion happening about the purpose of Cereals Canada and the mandate and what it needs to be doing for Canada's grain trade.
So certainly something that, we will share as we confirm what is public information and share what changes, but definitely upheaval, I think, is the right word on this one. And obviously these are, the gate push and the membership issue potentially very connected, but also potentially completely separate. So we'll dig into that as well. I did want to share our poll results from our poll. Now, this has only been up a couple days, but the feedback has been quite good. Of those who answered our poll, and we asked what a grain center of excellence, which was sort of the general term that was being used about this or this building or this center, we asked what it should do, and 28% of respondents so far said we don't need it. So, flat out. Now, there are also plenty of other people that weighed in on other things, such as technical advancements or end use and the things that SIGI has done in the past. So certainly there is some support for that. We've seen the wheat growers certainly very vocal on this point. Their president coming out, Gunter Jochum, saying, there's farmer money potentially wrapped up in this, and calling out that, this is not an appropriate use of funds. What so far have you heard, at least on feedback, as to this GATE project?
Well, it's interesting because one of the questions that has come up is who is driving this? Certainly there are people in the Cereals Canada office and staff, and probably certain members of Cereals Canada as well, in terms of companies and farm groups that are in favor of this and seeing this as a big vision for the next 50 years of Canada's grain trade and the importance of focusing on supporting our export customers in their technical requirements and training and understanding the Canadian crop and what's on the market and that type of thing, how it fits into their mills around the world. But one of the things is those people have been quiet since news about this GATE project has been public. There's been a lot of people speaking out against it. And like you said, the Wheat Growers Association is leading that charge in many ways, coming out against the use of farmers' money in this project. So Yeah, it's something that it's interesting how one side has been quiet so far, and we were expecting to hear from them on Thursday with the announcement and the launch and this whole vision being made public for what this facility and what Cereals Canada would look like in the coming decades. And now that's all been put on hold. And so there's some uncertainty. And I would say that we're at a critical moment right now in terms of the future direction of this organization. And if we see a certain part of the supply chain basically not present at the table in the future, at least there would still be a few grain companies at the table, but there's some uncertainty there too with a major acquisition of Viterra potentially looming here in the coming weeks as well by Bunge. If that deal is approved, what that means for Viterra's membership. And so there's a lot of uncertainty on the grain company membership side of this. And so if they're missing from the table, what does the future of Cereals Canada look like? And so I think we're at a critical moment right now where there's a lot of soul searching and deep conversations and tough conversations happening behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Okay. We will update you as we get more. Just quickly, while I have you on the line, another story. Again, we touched on this on Friday. The election in a Toronto riding of a Conservative candidate for the first time in 30 years. This was one of those ones that everyone said we're making a big deal out of it and the Liberals are still going to win. But late last night, Kelvin, when you went to bed, you thought the Liberals had won. And when you woke up this morning, no such luck.
Yeah, it was just the last few polls as they came in where the Conservative candidate pulled out ahead in this St. Paul's riding in Toronto. And like you said, this is as safe a seat as the Liberals have in Canada. And so for the Conservatives to win this, that means every Liberal seat in the country basically is not safe in a federal election. And I know we usually read way too much into by-elections, but certainly this is as strong a signal as there has been to Trudeau that there needs to be change, and Canadians are calling for change. If they're calling for change in downtown Toronto, that means they are in every other riding across the country.
Absolutely. Now, I will say it was close, as you mentioned. It was the last polls that came in. It was about a 2%, not even a 2% difference between the winner and the incumbent, but definitely makes a statement, I think. So we'll see how this plays out in the next couple months. One last thing before I let you go. It is June 25th. We have reached the capital gains inclusion rate changes day. Is everything now rolling? Where does this all stand as far as bills and what's law? Like, today is this day, and this will have an impact regardless of what happens.
Yeah, if your transaction wasn't legally finalized by today, you will now face that higher capital gains inclusion rate, tax rate. Although the higher exemption, also personal lifetime capital gains exemption, increased from 1 million to 1.25 million. It also takes effect today. So for some people, they may have waited to get their transactions through till after this, depending on their situation. But yeah, it takes effect today, although the legislation has not passed and it is still sitting in the House of Commons and they'll resume debate on it in fall. But the way our tax laws work, it can take effect before the legislation passes. Of course, if the legislation got blocked, then they'd have to resolve that somehow. But at this point, it is in effect as of today.
And realistically, when Parliament resumes sitting in the fall, we assume that this will go forward. But never say never based on last night's election results. So there you go. So we'll see. But yes, so for everybody, if you weren't already at your lawyer's office, I'm guessing they're very busy today. Okay, Kelvin, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate it, and have a great week.
Thank you. You too, Lyndsey.
All right, that does it for today's episode of RealAg Radio. Thank you so much for listening live here on SiriusXM. And hey, did you know that you can also download this as a podcast on Spotify and everywhere else you get your podcasts? Yes, you can. So if you missed an episode, head on over there. Go listen to it. You'll be glad you did. All right. If you've got any feedback, send us an email at lsmith@realagriculture.com or call that feedback line 1-855-776-6147. Or, of course, follow us and DM us across social media. We're everywhere, folks. All right. We will talk to you Friday for the Issues panel. Have a great week, everybody.